Hey everyone, welcome to Bagel TCG. We're going to be doing some Flesh and Blood content on my channel. We're going to start off with a deck tech for my Katsu Midrange deck that I piloted to a 4th place finish at my local Road to Nationals. It's mostly inspired by Winton Benford and Max Thomas, and I'm a pretty new player myself. I think I've been playing for about 2 months now, and I think that Katsu is probably the easiest hero to pick up for CC, for Constructed, which is going to be the main format that you're going to play at more competitive events. If you're starting out in this game, you're going to be starting out in Blitz usually at your local armory, but Constructed is for the more competitive events, and I definitely recommend Katsu. This is a mid-range deck, which means you're going to be able to switch between aggro and control. Um, they kind of are exactly what they think, and if you come from other card games, you know, aggro, aggressive game plans are when you're trying to kill your opponent as quick as possible. In Flesh and Blood, that means keeping and holding the tempo, making sure your opponent doesn't have any chance to swing back. And control is pretty much the opposite, right? You're trying to just keep blocking your opponent and keep stopping them from dealing damage to you until they either run out of cards in their deck, which is a fatigue game plan, or until they have a bad turn, they stumble a little, and then you can try to swing back with one of your combos. Katsu's ability, you're not going to be using a ton in this deck, except when you're doing those turns when you're swinging back for a bunch. Basically, when you hit with an attack action for the first time each turn, you can discard a card with cost 0. If you do, you search your deck for a card with combo, banish it, and you can play it that turn. Your two Kodachis are going to be your main source of damage in this deck. They each hit for 1, they cost 1 to attack with, and if you have a card with cost 0 in your pitch zone, they have go again. So you can pitch a blue cost 0, and you get in for 2 sources of 1 damage, which is pretty good. It's hard for the opponent to block since you have to block 1 card for 1 attack in this game, which means if they want to block both 1 sources, they have to give up 2 of their 4 cards, which most people aren't going to do, especially early on. So it's going to be consistent 2 damage for the first, most of the turns actually of the game until they get really low. Breaking Scales is a really good arms equipment. Um, it blocks for 1, which is great. You can block early with it, you can block late. The earlier is usually better because it makes it so you don't lose the value when you destroy it using the attack reaction, which is also a great attack reaction. You can Breaking Scales, you can destroy Breaking Scales, and you can give an attack reaction with combo +1. A lot of your combo cards have a trigger when they hit, and this can get them over. I've even won games, people forget about Breaking Scales or they just can't block enough, and that +1 can be lethal. One of my rounds in my Road to Nationals, the opponent only blocked 5, and this was able to get me to deal 6 and deal lethal. Breeze Rider Brutes are what you're going to be using in this deck. Snapdragon Scalers is used in more aggressive variants, but we're trying to be defensive, so being able to block for 1 is better than blocking for 0. This also, when you hit with a ninja card, you can destroy this and gives all of your attack actions with combo go again that turn. So it can even do some more fancy things than Snapdragons can by giving all of your cards with combo go again, so you can just keep stringing combo cards together. Tunic is really important in this deck. Every 3 turns you get a free resource basically, and some turns with using some of our bigger damage turns, we need an extra resource really bad. So that 4th resource is really key on a lot of turns. It also blocks for 1 if you really need to. Mask is our head equipment, and it's probably one of the best in the game. It blocks for 2, but then gets destroyed, so this is later in the game when the life totals are low. But until then, if your 3rd attack hits, and it's an attack action, and your previous 2 attacks have also hit, you draw a card, which is great. You start off with 2 Godachis, so those make your chain link at 2, and when you swing with the 3rd attack action, if it hits, you draw a card. The Kodachis themselves hitting won't draw you a card, but that doesn't really matter because usually you're making them the first 2 chain links. So you can go Kodachi, Kodachi, and Lightning Strike here, and if the Lightning Strike hits, you'll draw a card. Our last equipment is Null Rune Gloves. This goes in against any kind of hero that has small sources of arcane damage. Chain, for example, is the boogeyman of the format right now. They run usually all 9 Seeds of Agony, which all deal 1 source of arcane damage. So Null Rune Gloves is great in that matchup. It's also good against Viscerai. And usually you're not going to see any Kano, but you can put it against him again as well. Let's go over some of our attack actions. So how you're going to play this deck for the most part is you're going to keep your deck, which is 73 cards, not counting the equipment, which don't count for your main deck, and you're just going to take out cards that aren't good in that matchup, right? You don't sideboard in Flesh and Blood like you do a traditional game like Magic the Gathering, where you have a 60 card main deck and a 15 card sideboard. In Flesh and Blood, your whole deck is your main deck, and you just take out stuff you don't want. As long as you stay above 60 cards, your deck's playable, and sometimes if you think it's going to be a fatigue match, you can run your whole deck. Usually you'll take out stuff that isn't great in a matchup, right? So Command and Conquer costs 2, for example, and it might not be as good against aggro decks because it's a little heavy of a price paying 2 mana, and even though it can block, it's not always what you want. So you, for example, you might take out these 3 Command and Conquers against an aggro deck. This card's really good against control because when you play it, defense reactions cannot be played on that chain link, which make it so they can't use any of their defense reactions to block. This card is actually the best card in the game against other Katsus, and we don't want to see it against ourselves. It turns off all of our Flick Flacks, which we play all 9 of. So this card's great. If it hits, it also destroys their arsenal. So let's say they have a defense reaction in arsenal. This card's just amazing. It turns that card off, and if it hits, it'll destroy it. But against aggro decks, they're not really running as any, if maybe a few, but pretty much no defense reactions, and they might not be arsenaling much. So this card comes out against aggro decks. We run one Ancestral Empowerment. It's a good card. It's better in aggro Katsu, which we are not, which runs all 3 copies. We're just running one. It does block for 3, which is good. It costs 0, so you can pitch it early. If you want to deal more damage late game, you might want to pitch this early against control decks for that little oomph at the end. It gives a ninja attack action +1 and you draw a card. It's pretty simple. You're always playing your 3 E-Strikes. Typically, you're going to be doing Kodachi for 1, Kodachi for 2, E-Strike for 7. That's a 9 damage turn, and it uses 3 cards in hand, the E-Strike, the card you're bottoming, and the blue pitch. And it's great. You can put a card that's another red card on the bottom with E-Strike for damage later. So this card's great. If you have a full hand to swing back with, if they stumble a little, you can give it go again and swing with another big attack like this Pounding Gale down here. It does a lot. I don't usually use the draw card mode. You might do that sometimes, but I can't really imagine when, to be honest. The only time is if you had a Razor Reflex to give this +3 and go again. In that scenario, you could do that. So if you're doing an aggressive game plan, I have not had that come up yet, but it could definitely happen. You're running a bunch of defense reactions. You're running all 9 Flick Flacks. This card's one of the best cards in the game, and you are always playing it against control, or sorry, against aggro. And against control, you can consider taking out some of them, but probably not. You're probably taking out your other defense reactions instead, and still keeping your Flick Flacks. The blues, they all pitch for Kodachis if you need to, and they're just great. They give the next card you defend with combo +2 defense. So if you're defending with this red Kodachi or this red Flick Flack here, it's not gonna pop up big for me. If you're defending with red Flick Flack, which defends for 4, um, that blocks for 4 for the cost of 0. Then if you block with, let's say, this Fluster Fist, that's for 5. That's 2 cards for 9 block, which usually is 3 cards worth of blocking. So it's just great. Flick Flack's an amazing card. It's why we're able to be so good at blocking. You're also running 3 Fate Foreseen. This can come out, pretty much will always come out against control matchups. It's just a 0 cost, blocks for 4, just good against aggro. It opts 1 when you play it. It can matter. You want to opt red cards to the bottom against control, and against aggro you just want to opt pretty much anything that's not going to help you stay alive. Um, Nourishing Emptiness. This card's good against Prism because it has a 6 block, so it'll block Phantasm. Other than that, you probably want this out against aggro. You can keep it in against control because it can swing for 6. So I'm not sure on this card, to be honest. You run so many attack actions that it's never really online. So I'm not sure how much I like these 2 copies, and these are probably the 2 slots I would change first before anything else, especially if we start seeing less Prism. This card's just, usually I'm just blocking for 3 with it. I don't think ever once in that event I swang with it. I think I just blocked for 3 every time. So, because usually I'm playing against a lot of aggressive decks. Usually I'm the defender. So this card's either coming out or blocking. If you don't have these cards, you can replace them, for example, with the third copy of Flush Surface here. I'm not sure I love what these cards are doing. Flush Surface is a great card. We're running 2 reds and 2 blues. The reds are nice because if you land an attack, you can search for the red and it costs 0 and deals 4 damage. You can search for it off Katsu if you're out of resources, and it's a free swing for 4. If you have go again, of course. And the blues are your 0 pitch for 3, so these will pitch for 3, and they cost 0, so it'll do your Kodachi turn. So you can go Kodachi, Kodachi, leg tap, for example. You're never swinging with the blues really unless you have no other choice. The reds you'll probably swing with. And it's just good cards. I could probably go up to 3 copies of each, but this is what I'm at right now. You're also going to block with these a lot since they have combo for Flick Flack. They're just really good cards. They don't have anything combo-wise to synergize. We don't run open the center, but they just do what we want to do pretty well. We do run the leg tap line here, so we just run the 3 red leg taps. This card's amazing in the red mode at least. It costs 1 and it swings for 4 with go again. So 4 is a great number. No card that other than defense reactions naturally blocks for more than 3 in this game. So this will take 2 cards or a card in equipment to block for them. It has natural go again, and it's just a really good card. It does only block for 2, so against aggro you will want to take these out. We pretty much don't want any of our 2 blocks against aggro. Like, they just don't block for enough. We want all our 2 blocks out for the most part. This card will combo into our Rising Knee Thrust. We want all 3 blues because once again we can pitch the blues to Kodachi, so we're running a lot of 0 cost blues since they work perfect with Kodachi. You can go Kodachi for 1, Kodachi for 1, and then you have 1 more resource to use a leg tap, for example, or a pounding gale. So we're running the 3 blues. The 2 reds are great after the leg tap. It's what we want to do after the leg tap is the reds. What it's going to do is, since reds will swing for 3, if that's after leg tap, we'll get +2 and go again. So if you go leg tap for 1, you pay 1, leg tap for 4, and then you Rising Knee Thrust costs 0 and it's swinging for 5. You go Kodachi for 1, Kodachi for 1, 4 damage from leg tap, you're at 6, 5 from Rising Knee, they're at 11. It's a lot of damage. So that's taking 3 cards. So this is kind of what I'm talking about when your opponent stumbles a little. Let's say you only had to use 1 card to block that turn, right? So you still have 3 cards in hand. You can keep those 3 cards, and that's a lot of damage swinging back. So this deck's not trying to do the craziest turns ever. You're just trying to really block until your opponent stumbles and then swing back, right? It's a pretty easy game plan to follow. You're defending until your opponent messes up, doesn't do a ton of damage, you only need to block a little bit, and then you're hitting back, right? If you have, let's say they're just swinging for 5, right? And you know that's all they're going to swing for. You can just take 2, block for 3, and then swing back with that turn I was talking about. Sometimes you can take a little and swing back, but your deck's really just trying to take some damage and swing back, right? And block most of the time. Running 2 Pounding Gales, this is another you could go up to a 3rd copy of if you wanted. It blocks for 3 and has combo, which is what we want for Flick Flack, which means it'll block for 5 after Flick Flack, which is amazing. Outside of that, the actual combo we're never doing because it's after Open the Center, which we don't play, but it costs 1 and it swings for 5, so that's pretty much the sweet spot. That's the highest we can get for 1 resource, right? So we like that. We love to see it. That's why we're playing these 2 Torn of Tempos down here. You go pitch of blue, right? Kodachi, Kodachi, Pounding Gale. So that's 7 damage in a turn. They really want to block that Pounding Gale because it'll trigger Mask Momentum. It's just great. It's the same reason we're playing these 2 Torn of Tempos, which you could also go up to a 3rd copy of. Costs 1, swings for 5, blocks for 3, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't have combo, but if it hits, it has go again. So this is a lot more threatening for Mask Momentum, because if it's the last card in your hand, but they let it hit, you can draw off Mask Momentum and has go again, so you can get into another card, or you can draw a card and arsenal it, for example. So that's a great card. We're running all 3 Sigil of Solace. I personally really like Sigil of Solace. Gaining 3 life for 0 is really nice. I've won a few games where the opponent thought they had lethal, and I had kept a Sigil in arsenal to trick them into thinking they had lethal, and I let the damage through. I use Sigil. I used Sigil and then let the damage through, of course, so I didn't die, and then I was able to swing back for a lethal, right? So Sigil can be a little tricky in Arsenal. Gaining 3 is nice because a lot of characters, especially the Boogeyman chain, is doing mixed damage right now, so he does a mix of physical and arcane, and so this will heal all of it. So running all 3 copies, you'll run against aggro all the time. Even you probably take this out against control, but you can run it against them if you want. You can cut, keep 1 or 2. If you get all 3 during your game, you're effectively starting at 49 life, which is just amazing. So love Sigil of Solace, personal opinion. These are for when we're being more aggressive, so against a control deck, right? All 4 of these copies of these cards will come against aggro because they only block for 2 each, and they're both more aggressive cards. Razor Reflex, running 2 reds, cost 1. Usually you're going to want to use the second effect, which is you target an attack action with cost 1 or less. It gets plus 3, and if it hits, it gains go again, right? So it'll usually hit because you're giving it plus 3, and they might not have a block for it. And the go again's great, so you can give cards that wouldn't normally have go again, give some damage. Sometimes you use the first effect if it's killing them, so you can give your Kodachi plus 3. Usually you're not going to do that unless you're literally killing them with that Razor Reflex, because it's just 3 damage for 1, which is fine. Plunder Run costs 0, and you always want to Arsenal it. It's not nearly as good without coming from Arsenal. It's pretty much bad without being from Arsenal. So when you play it, the next time an attack action you control hits, you draw a card. That's anytime the next one hits. So if you don't hit with 2, but then the third one hits, you'll still draw the card. It's just it only happens once, but the next time attack action hits that turn, you draw a card, right? If you play it from Arsenal, the next attack action gets plus 3. So this card's great against control, like I said. You're not playing against aggro because it only blocks for 2. But you always want to Arsenal it first because that plus 3 is why you're playing it. Plus 3 and making your next attack action draw a card when it hits. Pretty much bad if you're not playing it from Arsenal, right? So you're always going to Arsenal this card. It also costs 0, which is important to note. You always want to note cards that cost 0, because if you really need to, you can pitch this to Kodachi. Let's say you have this card that costs 0 and is a red, and then you have these yellows that cost 1. That's 3 pitch right there to Kodachi's and another attack, right? It's also nice to pitch it to get later maybe for some extra damage against control. You always want to think about, since we're not shuffling a lot with our effect in this deck, you can pitch cards, even if you are shuffling, I mean, it's still back in your deck. Pitching cards that are good for more damage late game, right, is good against another control deck, right? Not important against aggro because you're just trying to survive, but against another control deck, you're both going to run to your last 10 cards usually at the end of the game, and if you have your big damage cards at the end of your deck, that's really great to have. We're running all 3 Sync Belows. These are also probably coming out against control. It's just a 0 cost, blocks for 4 defense reaction. Great to sync a card, so you put a card from your hand on bottom if you do draw a card. Pretty self-explanatory. We're trying to be defensive against aggro decks, and it does what we want. We're going to go over this main combo line now. This is the combo line we're going to do or at least attempt to do when our opponent stumbles, right? Even though this card only blocks for 2, we're pretty much always going to keep 3 of these in. Sometimes we'll take 1 or 2 out against really aggressive decks, like Chain, you might take 1 or 2 out. But usually we're going to keep our main combo line in the deck, which involves 2 of the special, I think actually his only specializations for Katsu, which is Mugenshi Release and Lure the Wind. So how this works is you need 3 total resources to do this line. If you have more beforehand, that's even better because you can use some Kodachis to increase your chain length and maybe get a Mask Momentum trigger. It involves 4 cards, so it has 3 red Surging Strikes, which cost 2, swing for 5, and have go again. Really solid attack. After that, you're going to want to hopefully use your red Whelming Gust Waves, another great card. This is a card, we're also playing the blues obviously because they pitch for Kodachis. If it's played after a Surging Strike, it gets +1, go again, and if it hits, draw a card, which is just an amazing trigger. So you're going to want to use, if you need to, your breaking skills on these to get over, right? So hopefully you're going to have your reds, which are going to swing for 4 with go again, and if it hits, draw a card after Surging Strike, right? So that's 5 damage and then 4 damage. Then you have your Mugenshi Release. If you're playing it after Whelming Gust Wave, you're only playing 2 of these because They don't do as much without these cards, basically, right? They cost 1, which is really bad because they don't pitch for Kodachis, and they only swing for 4 naturally, right? So they're like the weakest part of this link, but you do need 2 to be able to do the chain. If you want, you can go up to 3, but usually 2 is all you need. So if you're playing it after Whelming Gust Wave, it gets +1, go again, and if it hits, you search your deck for any number. Any number is really important because you're always searching for all of them. Any number of Lord of the Winds and put them into your hand, right? So that's 5 damage, 4 damage, hopefully, and then another 5 damage. So now we're at 14 damage for 3 resources. 14 damage. Then we're going to find all 3 of our Lord of the Winds. Hopefully, they're all in our deck still. And Lord of the Wind says if you're playing it after Mugenshi release, you can pay X resources as an additional cost. If you do, shuffle target attack name Surging Strike, Whelming Gust Wave, and or Mugenshi release from your graveyard into your deck. Then Lord of the Wind gains +X attack, right? So even if you don't have any of these, I mean, if you do have any of these in your graveyard, you will shuffle them in, because you should. There's no reason not to. Even if you don't have any in your graveyard, you can still pitch the resources and it'll get the plus attack. You don't have to target that many cards, right? So you're going to find all 3, you're going to pitch 2 of them for 6 resources, and then you'll give that 6 resources to give the third one +6, right? So it'll be swinging for 8. So you're doing 14 damage and then 8. So you're swinging for 22 damage for 3 resources, which is just absurd, right? That's half the life total of the opponent. So when I'm talking about you wait till your opponent stumbles, right? If they have a bad hand, let's say they have a hand that's like 3 reds and a yellow, right? I mean, you don't know that, but let's say they have a hand that's they just can't work with that well. Or you're against Chain and they had really bad banishes off the top, right? The opponent stumbles a little, and you have a way to get this combo off. That's what this deck's looking to do, to block the opponent out, to kind of make it so they don't have what's going on, and then you're trying to get his key combo off, right? The other combo, of course, is the leg tap rising knee thrust line, which is also great. There's also hurricane technique at the end of that line, so if this is after rising knee, it gets +1 go again, and if it hits, you put it into your hand, which lets you play it a second time. You can't play it a third time because hurricane or rising knee thrust wasn't the last attack anymore. So then after you play it, if you get it back to your hand and then play it again, it's only going to swing for 4 that time, but still really good in that line. Anyways, this line is what you're trying to go for, right? This line's really great. Um, since it is 4 cards, obviously this card doesn't count per se because you're searching for it, but since it is these 3 cards, right? It's nice if you can find any of these cards, especially like the red, not the blue whelming, right? But the 2 red whelming, the 2 Mugenshi, or the 3 surging, if you can find any of these and then arsenal them, um, if you don't have anything else to arsenal, obviously, because arsenaling and defense reactions or plunder runs better. But if you can arsenal one, you only need 2 of them, basically, right? Because you can search, not counting this one, because you can't search for this one, but you only need Surging Strike and then one of these 2, because you can search for the other with Katsu, right? So he can only search once per turn, but if you find a Surging and then you find one of these 2, you can do the line. So that's a lot to say. It's a really good line, and you want to do it if your opponent stumbles. I went into that a little bit too much. We have the unmovables, 3 red unmovables. If you play it from Arsenal, it gets +1 block. You can play it even if it's not from Arsenal. It costs 3, but it does block for 7, and if it's played from Arsenal, that's 8. This is good against Brutes and Guardians and Dorinthia that are swinging for really big attacks. And you're just going to keep it in a blue, pitch, block for 7 or 8. Don't I mean, if you can arsenal it, arsenal it, but if you don't have to not play it if it's in your hand and on arsenal. Blocking 7 is still really good. 3 snag, this is for chain. If it says blue pitch for 0, which is perfect for our deck, which is why we're running them. But you pretty much only really need it against chain. It doesn't do much against most of the other matchups. Basically against Riftbind, which they're trying to do at the end of the game. You have all 3, so if you get one early, you can use it on another Riftbind turn. But basically Riftbind gives itself a lot of attack if you've used non-attack actions before it. So when they use Riftbind, technically Riftbind's on the stack when they play it. On the stack, it hasn't resolved yet, so you can snag before it goes off. So they say I play Riftbind, right, and you say I play snag, since it is an instant, and that makes that Riftbind just swing for 1, right? Or what I think, yeah, I think they all swing for 1 naturally. It won't swing for much, right? And then it turns off the rest of their Riftbind turn. So when they go for Riftbinds, you go for snags. You can arsenal the one if you find it. Usually I like to arsenal them against chain, to wait until they go for that turn. Great card. 0 cost, blue, so you can also pitch it perfectly. Great for our deck. Against chain, of course. You play one time snap potion. It's a blue that costs 0, which is great. If you don't have anything else to do at the end of your turn and you happen to have go again, you can play it, and it can be good against control decks. You're pretty much always pitching it against aggro or just taking it out because it doesn't block, which is pretty awful. But against control decks, it basically gives you an extra action point that turn, so it gives you a free go again essentially. So how it's going to work is like, you destroy it, which costs an action, but you get 2 back. So that's just great against control when you can do some extra damage, basically. It's also key against Prism, who has a card called Arclight Sentinel that'll turn off, basically get rid of your attack, but this will get around that, which is great. Lord of the Wind, pretty self-explanatory, does this line. Kind of went over that line already. But the best part is it's a 0 cost blue, which is great for our Kodachis, and it's a combo with 3 block, just like this card, so they're great to block with too. You actually really never want to block with these cards because you always want all 3 in your deck, so you're just always pitching this card. Like, you're just always pitching this card, unless you have it naturally in your hand to do this line, but you're just pretty much always pitching this card because you're going to search with these later. It's just a great card. The 3 Fine Center is a blue 0 cost, so you're pitching this. It's also a combo card. We don't play the combo, but it's a combo card that blocks for 3, which is good with the Flick Flack. That's why you're going to see a lot of just cards like the Fluster Fist and the Fine Centers that are blue, 0 cost, block for 3 combo. Just everything we want. Works with Flick Flack, pitches for Godachis, does everything. The last card, we've been going for 26 minutes now, so we're going to just go over this now. The last card is one of Remembrance. This is a really good tech card. It's a 0 cost yellow, so if you have like that red Fluster Fist, that's a 0 cost swing for 4, right? You can pitch this early, which usually you're going to pitch it early. You don't want to use it early on. You're going to pitch it, and you still get your 2 Kodachis off, and then you can use your free attack. It also works with E-Strike, for example. So if your hand is Remembrance, any card in E-Strike, you can pitch Remembrance, Kodachi, Kodachi, and then E-Strike and bottom the last card, right? So it's still good for pitching, but it's going to let you shuffle up to 3 action cards from your graveyard into your deck and then banish it, right? So it can usually get you back this line if you use it up. Like if you had to block with too many Mugenshis or Lord of the Winds or any of this combination, it'll shuffle these back into your deck. Then you banish this, so you can't use it again, unfortunately. And it can also get you back, like let's just say you're playing against a control deck. If you can get 6 basically Command and Conquers against them, you won the game, right? Like if you play all 3 Command and Conquers, find your Remembrance, and then shuffle them back in and draw them again, they can't get through 6 Command and Conquers. You're turning them off their defense reaction so much. So this card it's just great. It's a really good tech card. I could see going up to 2. It's that good. It doesn't block, but that doesn't really matter. Like I know that's bad against aggro, but this card just can pull so much weight on its own. I actually won my top 8 round to get into top 4 because of this card. It was against Rob Siegel, who was on Dorinthia. We were both fatigued out. Basically, I had 8 cards left in my deck, I believe, and he had like 20, so I was going to lose basically to decking. But we were both on 4, and I needed to find a way to deal some damage. So I saw that I had the leg tap, Red Rising Knee Thrust, and Hurricane Technique line in my graveyard, right? And it's only a 3 card line that still does decent damage, which I needed to be able to pull off, right? So what I did is I remembranced, and I grabbed, I think I already had a leg tap in hand actually. I think I grabbed 2 Hurricane Techniques, the other 2, and 1 Red Rising Knee Thrust, right? And basically I just blocked him until I drew the combo. Just naturally had it all in my hands because I didn't want to rely on any hitting because I knew he wouldn't let them hit. And then I did the combo, and he just couldn't block all of it. I did get lucky. He had an energy potion in his hand, which doesn't block. So I was able to get in enough damage to kill him. But I think without the energy potion, it would have still left him at 1, which is still would have put me in a position to win, right? So it's just a really great card. It wins games. It won me my top 8 rounds, and I highly recommend one of, and I might try 2 of. I just love the card in this deck, right? So that was a long explanation. I hope it made sense. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. It's a pretty simple deck in terms of your game plan is usually you've got your 4 cards in hand, right? You're going to block with 2 of them usually, 1 or 2, right? So usually a Flick Flack first to block with, and then a combo card to block for 5, right? So that's going to be, you're going to block for 2 usually with 2 cards, and then you're going to keep 2 cards, right? You're going to keep a 0 cost blue card, which is going to pitch for 3 and then let you use both your Kodachis, and then you're going to keep a card that costs 1 and swings for a lot, right? If you have your Tunic counter, which is why Tunic is so great, you can also keep a 2-cost card, right? So, which is why Tunic's amazing because it lets you do those 4-cost turns, right? So you're going to block with 2 cards. Let's say you have a yellow Flick Flack and a 2 blue Flusterfist and a Command and Conquer, right? I've had that hand plenty of times, right? So I'm going to play my Flick Flack on their first attack, and I'm going to block with my Flusterfist. Or if it's a deck that only does one big attack, I'll block with Flusterfist and then use my Flick Flacks, right? Lose a little bit of value, but still blocking. I'm going to keep my other blue Flusterfist in my Command and Conquer, right? My turn, I'm going to pitch my Flusterfist for 3, Kodachi for 1, Kodachi for 1, use my Tunic counter, and then Command and Conquer for 6, right? That's 8 damage. It's really solid damage. It has a chance to pop their arsenal, and you still blocked a lot of damage from them, right? Presumably you took less than 8 damage, and you might get in more, right? And if they're using cards from their hand to block, every time they use a card from their hand to block, they are decreasing how much damage they can do to you on their turn, which makes it easier for you to gain tempo slowly, right? So this is almost like a tempo attrition deck. You're slowly making them lose tempo and slowly gaining tempo until you've killed them or fatigued them out. It's a great deck. I'm going to look at this sideboard guide real quick that Max Thomas sent me, who's a really great player. I think he has gotten 1 or 2 first places at Road to Nationals. I'll have this linked in the comments. This is what he says you should take out for each matchup. Remember, we're starting with our full deck. That's how Flesh and Blood works. You don't want to think of it as you have a separate sideboard. You have your full deck and you're just taking out cards you don't want, right? So pretty much everything you take out the 3 snag except for Chain, who is the boogeyman. You're going to want to play first because they want to play first, so you're taking that from them, and you're going to be defending, right? So you're taking out your Plunder Runs and your Razor Reflexes, they only block for 2. Taking out your 3 Leg Taps, they only block for 2. He says to take out 3 Surging Strike, which if it's it's probably not bad. I usually take the 3 Surging Strike out because it only blocks for 2. You keep 1 in for the line. 3 Unmovables because you don't want to use 2 resources to block for that much. Chain does smaller attacks, and the Time Snap Potion, right? Because it doesn't block. So this guide kind of goes over everything, and it's a great guide. Against other Katsus, you want to be the aggressor, for example. These are probably, I think he has it. Yeah, he pretty much has it in order of how popular decks are, except Prism's not this popular. Prism's probably under Dash. But these are the most popular decks right now. These right here. Actually, Bolton's pretty popular now too. So pretty much everything here is pretty popular. And then Rhinar and Levia are a little less so. I don't think he even has Kano on here because you're not going to play against it. But this is a great guide. You can either follow it to the T or just follow how you feel. And kind of mess around with the deck. Yeah, I hope you enjoy. It's pretty simple, just kind of, swinging for some damage, blocking some damage. It's a nice back and forth gameplay. It still has a lot of interesting decisions about what you're going to block with when you want to swing. Um, and I really enjoy it. I'm a pretty new player, and I was able to secure an invite to nationals using this deck right here. I'm going to be messing around at my local events. I'm going to start playing some Katsu aggro to see how I like that. But this is still going to be my baby and still going to be what I play most of the time. So I'm also going to link this great article, by the way, which Max Thomas himself, who did that sideboard guide, just put out, kind of talking about his experience and some great tips for Katsu. And I think he's running either the same exact deck list or something very similar. Might be the same deck list. So yeah, gonna link this in the comments too. But thanks for watching. Sorry the video was a little long, but I hope you enjoyed, and have a great night.